Hi, good morning, everyone. I am Kim Williams with Williams on Workplace Justice, and I have Ariella today with me, and I'm very excited to talk to her about some of her really incredible and unique work that I think is kind of special to this space. And so I've had so many friends who have come to me and said that when they were in a real moment of crisis, they've reached out to her, and she's been able to help connect them with the press and not just help connect them with the press, but help them do it in a way that keeps them safe when they're in the middle of a toxic environment, when they're dealing with bully bosses. And so, Ariella, thank you so much for being here today. Is there anything you'd like to add about your superpowers and all the things you do to help people in toxic workplaces?
No, I think just that I also have now moved into more of a journalistic role in writing some of the stories myself or telling some of the stories myself on social media. So, in addition to the press, there are so many different storytelling levers that one can draw from. And thank you for having me, Kim. Your work is so important, as well.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And I know when I first learned about you and I was reading through your website, some of the stories that you were sharing, like there were some big names in there that kind of surprised me. So, I think you have a lot of experience, not just going after big corporations, but sometimes celebrities and people who might be really afraid to step out into a public arena and tangle with someone like that. What's that experience like for you helping those folks if they're going after these big names?
Yeah, I mean, I think for anyone who's thinking about doing this and they've had no experience with it, it's understandably very scary, because they perceive the people at the other end of the story as very powerful, which a lot of times they are, and these are people who have a lot of resources, both legal and public relations resources. So when I meet people and they want to go up against a big name, or not go up against, just tell a story about a big name, there's a lot of understandable trepidation and fear. And I think my role is to first discern whether like if it's true, if I believe it to be true, and they usually people will come to me with evidence and um, some sort of corroboration in the form of other witnesses. So if I believe it to be true, then I try to talk them off the ledge a bit and say, well, this is your story and it's your truth. And this is, if it is true, then you really don't have so much to be worried about. Of course, the details, the devil is always in the details, and there are ways to silence people and suppress people. And sometimes people have signed documents, or they're thinking about signing documents for money to move on, or they're in a really precarious place mental health wise. So those are all considerations to factor in before deciding to tell your story. But um, I think part of it could also just be that I've been doing it for so long that I'm personally not as afraid if I know something to be true. And I try to transmute that, or give that bit of calming energy to the people who I'm working with.
Amazing. And as you were talking, I can't help but think about the Epstein files and hearing echoes of what you're saying in so many of the survivors and talking about that. But it's interesting how more and more is kind of coming to light. I mean, do you think we're at a point of like a sea change or a tipping point within kind of society at large to be more open to these kinds of stories, or not seeing much difference at all?
I do. I think that the Epstein files, well, people have always been really interested in the powerful and what they do behind closed doors and what they can get away with, and what kind of like shenanigans, for lack of a better term, they're up to. So people have always really been interested in that. But I think the Epstein files have really thrust into the spotlight just how many people were involved in his web, and just how many people who we thought were, some people thought they were heroes, some people thought they were geniuses, these terms that we attribute to very powerful people. We're realizing that in many ways, like, the emperors have no clothes and that a lot of it is an illusion. And so I think really people have known it all along in some ways, but it's been laid so bare with the Epstein files, um, just to see how many celebrities and politicians and business leaders and musicians and all these people who are coming out of the woodwork as being affiliated with Epstein, um, just how they operated and protected themselves and protected each other. And even if one of them stopped spending time with Epstein because they thought it was strange what was occurring, it's not like they were going to say anything about it because they wanted to uphold this secrecy within these groups. So I think that it remains to be seen whether people are bothered that Trump is as involved as he is, which is like the one anomaly where people seemed he could just he could do anything pretty much. And some of his supporters would be like, either it's fake news or we don't care. He's our savior, our Lord and Savior. Yeah, it's an interesting time for sure. And I think the appetite for stories about the powerful and how they actually operate and how power structures exist to support just a few, I think it's 2026 will definitely be a year for more revelations and people wanting to know more.
I hope so. I'm also seeing it just in kind of the in-workplace abuse space where I remember just going back a few years, people were afraid as employees to even talk about these stories. And now my LinkedIn feed is completely full of folks that are kind of coming out in their own small ways, sharing letters, sharing all kinds of different things like that. Okay, so 100% spot on. And I too am incredibly hopeful for 2026 to be kind of a year of some major sea change where I think the tolerance is lessened. And to me, I almost kind of get some Me Too vibes that we've seen before. But this time just kind of more focused specifically on the workplace and in all forms of kind of mistreatment there. And so I'm really hoping that we see some forward movement on some of the legislative actions that have been taking place, and other activities that I think are going to usher in kind of a new era of worker protections as more and more people come forward. But for folks who are watching this right now, and they want to talk to you, for example, when they're coming forward, I know a lot of people that I've talked to have worked with you. I think that they're thinking, oh, if the story can just go public, if the press can just get a hold of this, all my problems will be solved. What is the reality there? How do you answer folks who kind of envision a world where the story just breaks and their employer's held accountable and everything is good from there?
So I actually think, and this may be a dramatic word, but I think that's a dangerous. I know you're not saying that people should be viewing it this way, but I think it's dangerous to view it that way, that like if this happens, if this story is told, if a reporter pays attention, then like justice will be served or like I'll have my revenge. And like those are all very human feelings to have, and I understand that people want that. But I think that there's no I think I feel very strongly about people also working on their own mental health in tandem with the storytelling, and to be in a place where you can tell the story in a way that connects to more people than just you. It's you have to get there psychologically, and oftentimes if you're still really angry or hurt by something that someone has done to you or the system has done to you, you may not be in the place at that moment in time to tell the story. And frankly, you may not be in the place to tell the story for a long time, until you're able to come to terms with the idea that this can help a lot of people and shine a lot of light on what has happened while also being very cathartic and healing for you. But it's not, there's no one, like, you jump through this hoop and it's fixed. And even best case scenario, I mean, I've seen situations where a story has led to real concrete change in somebody's legal case or somebody's just mental health. I've seen that. Even then, like life goes on, and you have to be prepared to not like see the story and what has happened as a chapter of your life, in my opinion, that informs who you are rather than your sole identity. And I've only really come to this conclusion probably in the last year or two after doing this work for 6 or 7 years of just feeling very strongly that people tell their stories if and when they're ready, and they're doing it from a place of truth, like what I was saying earlier, wanting to tell the truth and wanting to maybe help others. And then, yeah, there's this catharsis and this element of freedom that is great. But if it's motivated by revenge, or then you start to get angry at someone like me or a journalist who's not moving fast enough, and the nature of journalism these days is that it moves very slowly, it's not going to be a good, you're not going to be pleased with the outcome. So that may sound a little stern, but that's how I feel.
Oh, I actually am glad you framed that or brought that up. I have a fear not framework that I try and share with folks who are going through a process like this. And F stands for fear, because so much of that is understandable in moments like this. But until you kind of address that, it's really hard to go through a legal process. It's really hard to go through a complaint process. And so I have to imagine that there's parallels for your work too. It's hard to advocate for yourself when you're in that much pain, and this stuff is truly painful. And so one of the best things you can do at the start of this process in any context, I think, is really kind of address the feelings there, as much as
Absolutely.
possible. Yeah, I'm really glad you raised that. So, I've also worked with whistleblowers too, who have come forward and it doesn't go as well as they had hoped. And that, journalists dig in, they're going to talk to both sides, they're going to get comments from the other side. How do you help people kind of navigate that space where it did not go as they thought it would?
Yeah, I think it's important to be as transparent upfront with people about what you just mentioned, that journalists have an ethical oath to report the truth. And it's not that requires going to the other side. And that requires getting comment from someone who the source maybe doesn't know they're getting comment from. And there's this very, I'm surprised actually how widespread this misconception is, that sources can read pieces before they go out. That could never happen,
Right.
because it would put the journalist and the publication at risk of being sued for not being objective. So I think for people, I try to be as transparent as possible about that process, that it is going to both sides, that they can't read the story in advance, all of that. And sometimes people do listen, and it's great. Sometimes they don't listen. And but I can't stress it enough that the journalist is not there to only tell their side, that person's side of the story. That said, I think what I try to tell people, and it does resonate with a lot of people, whistleblowers with stories, is that it actually is better for the whistleblower for the story to come out in an objective place, or through a messenger that the world and society deems to be objective. And because otherwise, if it's just the person writing a post on Substack or Medium or on X or making a TikTok, those can be effective as well, for sure. But it's not always, from a mainstream perspective, it's very much seen like that person's side of the story. And they can definitely, those channels are there for them to be citizen journalists in ways that they want to, in ways that are safe, if their lawyers say that it's okay for them to do so. But yeah, I think if a story comes out and someone feels like, wow, it wasn't just about me, that's probably actually a good thing. If a story comes out and it was actually adverse to the whistleblower, or didn't, or it was negative, I mean, then if someone like me is working on that, then I've screwed up in just helping represent them or help tell their story. But then also, if they just by themselves went to a journalist and it came out in a way that they didn't think was accurate, they can go to these citizen journalist platforms and share their side of things, and ideally with the momentum of an initial press piece to continue telling their side of the story. And then at a certain point, I would say people should not let it go, because that sounds very flippant, and I don't mean that, but just think about how and in what way they want to move on to talking about other things, maybe that are peripheral to that story. Maybe it's legislation, like what you work on, or it's not like in the nitty-gritty of their own personal tale, but it has to do with the broader picture and like what would a world look like where this thing that happened to me could have been prevented. So I think that that sort of campaigning and activism and storytelling is important coming on the heels of, even if it's super positive, any story that comes out about a whistleblowing act or a workplace horror.
Really glad you mentioned the positive endings because I think we need more of that out there for sure. Because I think there's so many stories people can point to where things did not end well, and it has such a chilling effect, and it keeps a lot of people kind of locked into bad places. And so, the more we can celebrate those successes, or like in my case, where I was able to come out on the other side okay, breaking that down, unpacking that, and trying to help more people kind of understand that process can also hold value too.
Absolutely.
Well, so you said now that, or at the beginning of this talk that you were starting to become a journalist more yourself or getting more involved. So as I understand that you were kind of working with the press before to help connect people with reporters. So can you talk a little bit about the work that you're doing now as a journalist?
Sure, yeah. So I think I realized that there were there were so many stories and not enough journalists. There are some really incredible journalists who I work with and still partner with, but I saw so many stories that I wanted other journalists to tell just fall by the wayside. So I started to write them myself and pitch to publications. And I have a couple of Substacks, because Substack is now not only just a writing platform, but it's becoming more of a social media network, kind of like a Twitter slash X, whatever we want to call it, replica, but a healthier one, much healthier. It's like
Yes,
my feed is
I'm a
all,
huge fan. Yeah.
yeah, my feed is all like positive, inspirational quotes, but ones that are not too cliche, just people like talking about inventing and creating and human connection and not like trolling each other
Yeah.
all the time. And so so I have a few Substacks. I have one that is focused on the intersection of tech, labor, and power, where I do both investigations and also interviews with workers, specifically tech workers. And any story that comes to me that has a hook around power or power structure, which is such a broad mandate. I know it's like a huge umbrella, but I'm
It's
interested,
needed. Yeah.
yeah, I'm interested in hearing. And then I've now started to create a lot more of my own video content. So TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, like that's just where a lot of people are consuming information these days. So TikTok right now is my strongest channel, and I've told some workplace stories there and on behalf of people. And Instagram is, I had a video go viral the other week about the Palantir CEO having a breakdown on the stage of the New York Times Dealbook Conference. So that's now a channel, and then YouTube is another place. So it's a blend of all these new media platforms and then freelancing for, I just had a piece come out in Slate magazine about, it was actually a health story. And then I work also with a whistleblower company that fights fraud called the Anti-Fraud Company. They they themselves, the company is the whistleblower, but sometimes work with relators, like, as I'm sure you know, the like official term for whistleblower, to file lawsuits, key tam lawsuits. So healthcare fraud, defense fraud, essentially if any private company is defrauding, let's say Medicare at a huge scale, whistleblowers, if they have information about that, can bring it forward and make a lot of money. Like sometimes these
Amazing.
settlements, yeah, sometimes these settlements can be like in the hundreds of millions or
I've seen.
billions.
Yeah.
Gets 30%. It's a long process, so
Mhm.
it's not like you just file the lawsuit and become a
Yeah.
multi-millionaire, but
Yeah.
it is so I'm working with that company as well because I think what they're doing is really novel to just be filing themselves these claims.
No, and I love that too, because it's finally someone's on the side of the superhero because whistleblowers go through so much and can
Ooh,
end up villainized, have their careers destroyed. They lay a lot on the line, and they're all just people of, in my experience, high integrity who are just trying to do the right thing. So I really love hearing that. That's incredible.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, perfect. I'm going to be adding some information on how to reach Ariella below, but just want to say thank you again so much for being here.
Thank you, Kim. This was great.